Okay, welcome to another edition of the 21 CCC Public Talk. I am Victor Xi. I'm the director of the 21st Century China Center. Of course, the 21st Century China Center is housed within the School of Global Policy and Strategy at UCSD. And of course, GPS is one of the premier public policy education institutions. We offer a master's program in public policy international affairs and Chinese studies. MCPA people here, a master's in Chinese economic and political affairs. Yes, you should know that, but I always call it MCPA. So today we're very honored to have Professor Minxin from Claremont College with us. He's like an elder brother for me because we have the same advisor, Robert Farquhar. Of course, he's done so much better than I have done, especially in terms of writing books. So his formal title now is Tom and Margot Pritzker 72 Professorship of Government, and also the George R. Roberts Fellow at Claremont McKenna College. And he's the editor of China Leadership Monitor. So for those of you, even somewhat interested in China, I highly urge you. It's a free publication available online, China Leadership Monitor. Every issue has very in-depth and insightful essays on different aspects of China. So it's a great resource. He's the author of a number of excellent books, including China's Trapped Transition, The Limits of Development Autocracy. Well, before that, of course, From Reform to Revolution, The Demise of Communism in China and Soviet Union, and also China's Crony Capitalism, The Dynamics of Regime Decay. Of course, we are here today to talk about his newest book, which is China's The Sentinel State, Surveillance and Survival of Dictatorship in China. So please join me in welcoming Professor.
Thank you very much, Victor. I also want to thank 21st Century China Center, if I get that right, for hosting this event. Today really want to sort of walk you through the main findings of this book. Let me just preface my remarks by saying that there is a huge amount of interest on state surveillance in China, but scholars have not really been able to produce what I would consider high quality work on the subject, mainly because of the lack of materials, the lack of reliable, credible sources. So about 6 years ago, actually 8 years ago, not before, 2016, I began to look into this subject. And what it took quite a while to find enough data to piece together a basic puzzle. I'm not saying that this is the last word. In the future, we're going to have a lot more information, hopefully, on China's surveillance system. But so far, I'm not shy to say that probably this is the most informative resource you're going to have on China's surveillance network. Why did I sort of get interested in this? Mostly because the kind of coverage of this subject at that time was obsessively focused on technology. I study politics. Based on my sort of own professional experience with China, the Chinese system excels not in technology. Probably it's pretty good today, but it really excels in organization. So there appeared to be some disconnect between the mainstream perception of Chinese surveillance and what somebody like me believed to be the real source of China's strengths in terms of social and political control. So this is the background. And the theoretical idea is fairly simple. That is, all dictatorships repress their people. But there are two kinds of repression. One is reactive, exposed repression. So I want to show you. So this is Tiananmen Square, May 1989. This is June 4th, 1989. And this is really positive for the government. If they could have prevented this, they did not have to do this. So that is reactive, exposed repression. And now after that, China embarked on a decades-long, very expensive, extremely sophisticated, and I would say largely successful effort to build up its repressive capacity, preventive repressive capacity. This sort of preemptive. So that's symbolized by surveillance, of course. Surveillance is not just done by machines, but by people as well. So theoretically, preventive repression is much more desirable than reactive repression. But it is desirable. It is not easy to have an effective apparatus to implement preventive repression. There are sort of three challenges for any dictatorship. The most well-known one is so-called the coercive dilemma. That is, how you are which security agency are you going to assign this task of preventive repression? The challenge is the security agency has to be big enough, powerful enough to carry out these activities. But if it is powerful enough, the security agency could itself be a threat to the politicians, to the rulers. So this is one dilemma. The second dilemma is really resource constraint. Dictatorships, most of them rule low to middle income countries. And repression is actually a very expensive business because you have to hire a large police force, equip them with technology and other things. And then you have to recruit informants. Running informants requires another set of resources. So the resource constraint is another problem that dictatorships have to face in dealing with the challenge of preventive repression. And this last one is operational effectiveness. How are you going to actually carry out your surveillance activities that cover as large a share of the population as you feasibly can, but also achieve the desired results of preempting collective action? So this is the quick theoretical focus. So what in the rest of the talk, I will talk about how the Chinese system began since after 1949, and what are the key characteristics of the Chinese system that make the Chinese system really stand apart from other dictatorships. So this would look at how it is organized, how it gets its intelligence mostly, not from technology, from informants actually, and then the scope, what is the targeted population, the size of the targeted population in China. And finally, we say a little bit about the use of technology. So now just back to the kind of sources that allowed me to piece together this puzzle. China is, of course, a country that does a pretty good job in preventing sensitive information from getting into the public sphere. But keep this in mind, it's a gigantic country. More than around 3,000 county level jurisdictions, 300 city level jurisdictions, and a lot of government bureaucracies. They all publish annual reports. They call yearbooks. So this is yearbooks. And police agencies also publish the annual reports called 公安年鉴, and universities publish their annual books. I don't know whether UCSD does, but UCSD's equivalent, your sister, whatever, Fudan, others, they're very thick annual annual reports. And Chinese police also publish policing gazettes. These typically cover 20 years, but they contain nuggets of very useful information. So, and finally, they have police academies. They use textbooks. So textbooks do not necessarily give you sensitive information, but they do explain policing terminology. They outline procedures, law enforcement procedures, how they recruit informants, what kind of sort of steps that have to be followed. So if you put all these together, then you have the ingredients to produce a book. So it took a long time. You have to. It's quite frustrating. I remember some, on a good day, if I go to this library in Hong Kong, which has been now sort of locked up, you go through 200 local gazettes. If you get 2 pieces of information on the number of so-called key population targets the police watch, you are very successful. So it took a long time, but really eye-opening. So this is where how I go. So the information. So first back to Chinese history. As soon as the Communist Party gained the state, gained victory in the Civil War and began to build the communist state, they implemented a very comprehensive, brutal campaign to eradicate, to annihilate, liquidate, whatever you want to use, and identify threats. So this is the campaign is known as the campaign against the campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries. These are mass executions. This had the effect of identifying something like 20 million people that needed to be watched. They actually forced, they had categories of people that you have to go to the police and register. So this is the terror campaign. And second, they, based on advice from the Russians, from the Soviets, they set up the domestic secret police. The domestic secret police is not the KGB. Okay? It is called Political Security Protection Bureau, #1 bureau in the Ministry of Public Security. This is the Ministry of Public Security. Incidentally, this is China's first Minister of Public Security, an exceptionally brutal man, extremely effective, a former general, who, if you want to sort of know something about poetic justice, who was purged by arm before the Counter-Revolution, and was treated very poorly during the Counter-Revolution. But he played a very important role in establishing China's Ministry of Public Security. And they also recruited a very large number of informants. There's this excellent book, if you want to know about informants in those days. It's called Spying for the People, written by a colleague who now lives in Sweden. And then they build local level security organizations staffed by party activists. And then at a very central level, they have a leading group in charge of domestic security. So if you look at these, other than the terror campaigns, okay, if you look at some of these institutional pillars of state surveillance, they were all built in the 1950s. So it's not, the Chinese system is not new, it's old. The difference is that
So basically, the political security protection bureau
Yes. How come it's like
was already there in 1950s.
click the realization times? You have to click it back. Yeah.
Okay. So, yes,
So the political
security protection.
was already there in the 50s.
Was yes, in the 50s. Simple. We'll talk about the switching of names, the change of names. So the targets, the sort of there's one main surveillance program, and it is called 4 category elements. Class-based, the landlords, rich peasants, counter-revolutionaries, and so-called bad elements. Altogether, in the Mao period, roughly about 27 years, China placed 20 million people in that program. If you are in this program, effectively, you lose your civil liberties. So each time you want to move, you travel, you have to get permission, and you work under watchful eyes of local activists. So it's hard to, so 20 million, what do we make of this? We only know that over 27 years, 20 million people were labeled as this. So what I did is trying to compare the size of the target population on the Mao with the size of the target population today. So I was able to go to get 10, 12 provincial police cadets, and they actually disclose the number of people for a given year. Then I dug up the population figure. So my estimate is that in the Maoist period, it's about roughly 1.6% of the Chinese population was placed in this surveillance program. And the surveillance program ended in 1979 when reform began. So these people, so-called 4 category elements, their labels were removed. At that time, the police also tried to institute another much more formal, complex program called key populations. But because key populations had to be implemented along with the hukou system, it couldn't, because we talk a lot about hukou. Hukou became effective only in the 1980s, early 1980s. In the under the Mao, China's countryside was barely policed. So hukou system, they had enormous trouble using very limited policing resources to run this program. So the main program is about this, and this program was not run by the police. It was run by local authorities. Local authorities, factories, local party branches, township governments, they had the power to label people for category elements, and they have the power to remove the label. The police simply did not have the manpower to do this. So this one, we'll talk more about this later on because it's still in existence today. And this was abolished, but it has been replaced by a different program. Okay, so this is, so the Maoist period, when you look at how surveillance evolved, you are struck by, I was struck by two events, two big shocks to the system. One was the Great Leap Forward, this crazy forced industrialization scheme starting in 1958. And this ended in economic disaster. So the police had to downsize. So they downsized the police, and lack of resources prevented the Maoist regime from strengthening the surveillance system. The other shock was a political shock, the Cultural Revolution, starting in 1966. And that really dismantled for a while the formal security agency. So these two shocks did enormous damage to the party's capacity to control the police. In the 1980s, they began to repair the surveillance system. But the surveillance system was under two constraints. One was still 1980s, China was very poor, so they did not have the resources to recruit, to equip the police. I remember reading a local county police cadets talking about its latest technological equipment, a camera, 1980, because they need camera to take pictures of crimes. So that was China in the 1980s. The political constraint was that 1980s was the most open period in post-49 history. The top two leaders at the front of the Chinese Communist Party administration, Hu Yaobang and Zhao Zijiang, were reformers. So they had direct control over most aspects of law enforcement. So that was another factor. And I thought Deng himself diverted a lot of policing resources to fighting crime. So that explained why the 1980s was a very strange decade, that you had a lot of dissident activities going on. But you ask, how come the police did not bother them? The police did not crack down. So my conclusion is that these three factors. And so the real modernization, the great leap forward of China's state surveillance began after 1989. The regime had an existential incentive to prevent a similar crisis from happening, and they appointed very capable hardliners like Luo Gan and Zhou Yongkang to be in charge of building up the repressive capacity. They issued a series of documents. They were all detailed in the book. And starting in the 1990s, the Chinese economy took off. And that generated a huge amount of resources for the party to build its surveillance capacity. So this just gives you some idea because of the size of China's repressive apparatus. This is a proxy for its surveillance capabilities. So first of all, it's very difficult to get an accurate number of the number of policemen, uniformed policemen in China, because it's classified. Still, they would leak some. So these are the data points. You can see 58, this is the year of the Great Leap Forward. So 14 years later, they have fewer police. They have fewer policemen. And then even 84, we're talking about 36 years later, they only have about 50% police. So this showed that for a long time, the Chinese security forces were severely under-resourced. Now, this year, 89, they had some 169,000, but within 20 years, right?
Yeah.
20 years, almost three times. So this shows that how fiscal resources allow them to sort of increase their security forces. So these are from two local counties. They give you a much more granular picture of what happened. So 50s, because I want to look at the effect of the Great Leap Forward and the Great Leap Forward on policing. You had such a huge, they lost a lot of people, a lot of police. And then 70s, they barely sort of recovered to the 50s level. And you look at 80s, 90s, we don't have this for one county, but 80s versus 90s, you have this huge increase in size and in the size of the police. And this is a slide on data on domestic security spending which funds the police. So 1991, 10 billion yuan, not that much. So 30 years later, 1.1 trillion. So my calculation is that spending rose 24 times in real terms. That's within 30 years. So this amount of spending is behind China's very extensive and quite effective system. So these are the 4 features of the system. One is that the Chinese system is quite different from other systems. That is, I call this distributed surveillance. In practically all other dictatorships, they assign domestic surveillance to one police agency, the secret police. But China splits this task both within the police, domestic secret police, the secret police, and community police. They also split this, they also assign the task to Communist Party organizations, to local bureaucracies. So a lot of people in China engage in some form or other, to varying degrees, surveillance activities, targeting suspects. This wide distributed surveillance is really about preventing the emergence of a very powerful secret police. Because if a lot of people do this, you don't need a very powerful secret police. And then because they have just so many agencies, organizations doing the activities, they actually need coordination. So the Chinese invention is this sort of a party bureaucracy, the legal political affairs committee. I checked no other communist dictatorships have the equivalent, because it's a top-down at every level of the state. There's this committee. This committee implements security policies and oversees and coordinates various actors. So, and China's the suit is what I call lean and mean, that China's formal security agency is actually very small. Its domestic secret police, later we'll talk about, is really a fraction of what the Stasi was. And they, Stasi, when East Germany disappeared, the Stasi had about 91 full-time employees. So if you use equivalent to sort of 0.6%, 6 to 1,000, if we will use the same ratio, China's secret police, the equivalent that would be Bureau number 1 plus MSS. Together, they would have 8.4 million people. So this is an unthinkable number for China. So China's formal secret police and domestic secret police is actually very, very small. And another thing about China's surveillance state is its tactics are very sophisticated, much more so than what I read about. So this is the command and control. This is the incumbent head of the Central Political Legal Committee. He used to be China's secret police chief. This is the first. Normally, they would give the position to China's domestic police chief. They wouldn't give it to the secret police chief. Now, so what about this agency is that it was before 1989. The agency was very small. It did not have full-time office. The head of this body at the local level was not a full-time position. But after 1989, this agency was built. So today, an average county would have 5 to 10 people. They do not engage in operations, but they do a lot of coordination. Every year they would meet. The central level, they meet in early January, and then at provincial level, city level, county level. So within about 2 to 3 months, the security agenda of the Communist Party has been fully communicated to the lowest level. and so-called around sensitive dates. These are the dates that are viewed as politically important. Then this agency, or this bureaucracy, would supervise, enhance the security measures. So it's about now this is a former Chinese security agency. So this is the biggest one, the Ministry of Public Security. As I said, it's the one in charge of domestic secret police. Today it's called political security protection, 政治保卫. Before 2019, it was called domestic security protection, 国内安全保卫. Very different. But why did they change? Because Xi Jinping believes that political security today is much more important than domestic security. So they changed this back. So this unit is in every police agency down to the county level or district level. We don't know because they're not going to tell you how many they employ. So based on a few local data points, my estimate is it's actually very small. We're talking about 3 to 5% of the total police force. So that's about 60 to 100,000. So relatively small. And it does. It mostly relies on performance. Very high priority targets it will handle. Now, at the community level, surveillance is carried out by police stations. There are a lot more police stations, so they would run this surveillance program. Key populations. I'll talk about this later on. They also recruit their own informants. Now, this is the sort of most secretive Chinese security agency, MSS. You hear a lot about this. The problem with this agency is that we don't know a whole lot. There's not much about this agency. And what we do know is that if you have a foreign connection in China, then you fall under this agency. And this agency is very active in ethnic minority areas, largely because Chinese leaders believe that unrest in those areas is connected with foreign support. Okay, so this is the backbone of China's domestic surveillance system. It's about labor. It's about spies and informants. That is, they recruit a lot of them because it has a really small police force, so they have to rely on this. You really cannot rely on technology because technology has a lot of blind spots. So favorite example is that they see somebody walking on the street. That's all they know. But to know what he's thinking, what about his plans, you can only find out through informants, people who are close to him. So that is, so there are several categories. The most elite is called 特别情报人 or special intelligence personnel. And the number is unknown. We really do not know. In one chapter, in one of the chapters, one county provided some numbers. But based on the one data point from Shanxi province, Shanxi had about, let me just see there. So this is from Shanxi. So they very helpfully give us sort of year by year. You can see the sort of growth. My figure is that 4 per 10,000 in Shanxi. These are not for political spies. This is also spies. So if we use this, China, the police will be running 600,000 roughly. So this and so this is the this category and very elaborate procedure for recruiting because this is a police-run informant program. Secret profiles, aliases, training, They have secret operating bases. Some of them are actually commercial establishments. So this is now what kind of tasks do spies carry actually perform? Three basic tasks. One is to assist the police in investigating a particular case. For example, if Victor is suspected of organizing this underground Marxist group, they actually don't like you to organize Marxist study. Okay. So they would find Lei to infiltrate Victor's group. So Lei will become so-called case spy. So this is to bring the example. So about 10% of all their spies perform infiltration to get into groups or close to suspects. Then the second kind of spies, they're called position control. They do not watch every spot, every section. They would prioritize institutions, areas that are high risk areas. If they suspect that 21st century China center is this hotbed of dissidents, then they would recruit somebody to come to the center very often, even get employed by the center. I'm not suggesting it, but this is China. Then that person would provide regular information on the information regular. So that's 40%. Then about 50% are sort of general purpose intelligence spies. So about 50%. So it's actually a pretty intelligent way of using spies, not just random assign them. So this is the community police. They recruit their own spies. They call it 治安耳目, public order informants. Every policeman has a quota, 2 per year. So they sometimes have a quota as well. So now is what kind of spies they they tend to recruit. Makes a lot of sense. Taxi drivers, why taxi drivers? They actually know who gets into the taxi, where that person gets dropped off. So Sachi 2004, about 8% based on my calculation, because they had so many informants, spies, and so I looked at the number of taxis because you can actually check the number of taxis. So that's security guards, delivery men. These are people who have access to your homes, who can parking block attendants. They like them too. And in China, people live in so-called 小区 communities. So every community would have a custodian, and that custodian is ideal recruit. So these are all their recruits. So this is 陕西. So the other category, so the ones run by the police are the most elite. They follow strict procedures. Now, the one that has the largest number, China has the largest number of, is called 信息员 informants. They are called by all kinds of names, but the 信息员 is the most used. So because this is not run by the police, there's a lot more information about this outer circle, the least elite group of informants. So a lot of local jurisdictions, dozens of them, in my book, they would report the number of informants recruit per year. So all I did was to find the population of that city, of that county. So my estimate is there's a range, 0.7 to 1.3, so roughly about 10 to 16 million people on books. Okay, I have to emphasize on books, some sort of informants for the government. But what is interesting is that they also sometimes provide data on the number of pieces of information they generate from this group. So we should find that there's a big gap. That is, the average number of pieces of information generated per informant on the books is 0.4. So how do you explain this huge discrepancy? So I've thought this through. That is, probably they have a hard quota on the number of informants you have to recruit. So local officials would come and say, would you like to be an informant? So if the local official comes to you and makes an offer, it's Godfather's offer, right? An offer you cannot refuse. They will say, oh yes. But whether you actually perform, whether you gather intelligence and report, that's a different matter. Because I don't think there's a quota on this. Because that's something you cannot control. And local officials, they have to gain. If you report too much, maybe your area has too much trouble because not the flood well on you. So, and then for people who sign up as informants, this is, by the way, not a pleasant task to look at. So they don't want to do this. So if the local official comes and say, hey, have you heard anything? Yeah, I've been busy. I don't know. So the consequences for not reporting something are a lot less than turning down a request to be. So this is my explanation. I think it makes sense. So, but then, what kind of information they actually generate? The most valuable information is called enemy teaching, enemy intelligence. It's about dissident activities, ethnic minorities. It's a very small sheep. For good reason, because I think these people have really no access to very sensitive people. So this is, and then political intel about what people are thinking about government policy. That's about 20%. And then social intel, what people are talking. So these are the sort of intelligence. Now let's just scope of surveillance. The people they actually watch in China today. The police watch about 5 million people. These are mostly ex-cons. And then the key individuals program has replaced the 4 categories elements. This is the biggest program. And we're talking about 5 to almost 8 million people. So altogether, China watches about 11 to 13 million people. They're on blacklists. And in this category, we have a lot more political suspects, ethnic minorities, former military personnel, and dissidents, and repeat petitioners. So high-tech surveillance can try to bury it. China did not have a fully modernized system until about 10 years ago. They began to build this. The first project is called Golden Shield, that's digitization. The second is the visual surveillance called Skynet, run by the police, finished in about 12 years ago. And then the third is Sharp Eyes, began 9 years ago. So the social credit system is still something in the works. So this is a very quick overview of the system. And let me just repeat, this system is very powerful, but it still plays a secondary role in the whole scheme of things. Probably in the future, it will play a bigger role, but in the foreseeable future, China will continue to rely on its labor-intensive, organization-intensive system to maintain stability. Okay, thank you.
So I'm sure there are a lot of questions out there, but I will start with one question for you. In all the research that you have, I mean, one thing I love about your books is it often will talk about money, which is what I'm interested in, of course. Is there any sense of like budget constraints, for this kind of work, and where do they spend a lot of money, for this?
Okay, so the informants actually don't cost you. Most of them are unpaid, and they're paid by piece. So if you generate something valuable, you get paid. So that's what costs a lot of money is technology, because tech, you have to update.
Yeah.
You have to maintain, and even because those cameras, facial recognition cameras are very fidgety, because they're very delicate. You have to clean, and China is a pretty dusty place. So they're constant, and they are all connected through fiber optics, and that's quite complicated. So, for example, Wuhan, city of 10 million, they have a maintenance team of 2,000 people. No one contract out. Okay, so the local cable company or even the local telecom company. So these systems were built by telecom company. Now, they're all so when you go through these cadets, they will identify the contractors. What's interesting is two things. One is some ongoing maintenance, updating. The other is the overall security budget in China. So 85% is funded by local governments. Local governments are not in great shape. So that because even when they had money, they could not afford to build these systems. The Golden Shield, from what I can tell, was built with central government. Skynet was built with local government. And I think the least viable, sustainable project is Shanghai's. Shanghai's was not even built with local money, it was a hodgepodge of money. So even when you look at Skynet, this is a police-run visual surveillance program. So talk about different financing models. It turned out, because you think that the best thing would be for the local government to spend, to sort of invest in its own system. So one-time expenditure, and then every year it would provide maintenance, updating. Even local governments did not have that money. So what they did was to ask a telecom company, you build the system and we lease from. And you run this. So it shows that there's a lot of physical constraint.
But they don't pay right now. That's what I hear.
Well, yeah, that is the problem. Because if you, of course, they would still.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go for it.
What terms do you have of the demographic composition of informants? Are these grandparents who sit on local party committees? Who are they?
No, they don't. It's just we only know some professional wise, because they will not tell you their age. But there is this slide. If you to go back, you will see that there is this ad for recruiting for an informant. Is that anybody below 70? So I think I'm still eligible. Yeah.
Are you surprised by how much information you're actually able to get?
Yes.
Because information is tightly controlled, and why would these counties, cities, province level, whatever, be able to publish this kind of information?
Yeah.
And I guess the follow-on is, how much of this information is ultimately credible? Are they giving the information to sell a budget to the next level up, or is this actual reporting of factual information?
So the first one is that thanks to Chinese bureaucracy, they follow. There is a format for reporting yearbooks. So you look at all yearbooks, it's the same format. So it facilitates research because you know where to turn, right? So there's this category like political legal work. So in this process, then it's all up to two people. One is the policeman or the official, the person in charge of filling the blanks, because I think what happens is that each department and toward the end of the year is asked to fill out this form. So it depends on whether the person who wants to fill more information, most of them fill as little information as possible because it does not get. But some of them feel that, well, I've done something, I need to report. So that will be. And then the second person is that these publications go through a vetting process, 保密. That is, every county, they have a bureaucracy called state secrets bureaucracy, and they would review. So if the guy is somebody's son-in-law, daughter-in-law, whatever, not really qualified. So that's how leakage occurs. So the second one we really do. That is, but you can sort of use some common sense. In the book, I eliminated 2 outlines where they reported a lot of information. It's simply incredible because all the others were playing this within this narrow beam. So, but we have no way of knowing today. But as I say, this is all I have. If you have good stuff, let's have it.
Some leaks.
Okay. What happens to individuals who say, no, I don't want to do this? Is there any consequences for saying no?
We don't have evidence in there, but you can use your imagination, right? It depends on if you run this shop next to the square, which so you observe a lot, the police comes and said, do you want to do this? You say no, then they will inspect, they look for health violations, they check your tax records, and you will have trouble renewing your license next year. Of course, you know these not so nice things will happen to you. Of course, you say yes.
Well, there's positive incentives too, right? If you
Oh, yes.
collaborate, then
Oh, yes, that's.
you know, all their approval,
Yeah,
licensing
approval,
is
license, yeah.
faster and so on.
Yeah, so other dictators cannot do this because only a Leninist system that has ears, eyes, presence everywhere, that has so much control over the economy can do this. So the Chinese system cannot be replicated.
Jeff, any online questions?
Yeah, we have a few questions from Zoom. Question from Christine Grunfeld. She's asking, do all the kinds of spies have to document or prove what they denounce? Yeah.
Oh, prove what they report.
Oh, report.
Yeah.
No, I don't have any evidence because it's that is you, I think it's, if it triggers an investigation, then probably it's handled much more serious. But given manpower constraints, most likely, if you are with Falun Gong, if you're with the ethnic minorities, high-profile dissidents, then they want you to document. Probably they want you to build a stronger case.
No, but for ethnic minority, they don't care. They'll just arrest everybody.
Well, that's in
Doesn't
Xinjiang,
matter.
but not in sort of a Shanghai or Beijing. I think probably they would be a little bit sort of a technical.
Right.
Another question we have is, to what degree are some foreigners in and outside of the China survey?
Oh, foreigners are heavily surveyed because if you look at university yearbooks, universities work with secret police very closely, and they list from professors, from students, because they suspect it.
Yeah, you know, when I was at Beida as an exchange student,
Yeah.
so there used to be a centralized phone line, right? So
Yeah.
they'll call you. It was like, someone's calling you. Go downstairs.
Yeah.
You start talking to your parents or whatever, and you hear a click.
Yeah.
Sometimes you even hear someone breathing.
Yeah.
right? My parents. No, it's essentially, yeah.
I just ordered your book online.
Oh, thank you.
So,
Yeah, it goes up by some 10% of ranking. Yeah.
So do you cover in the book, or if not, commercial espionage?
No.
Well, okay, so then what if any part of this would be included in the work in China, that is?
In China, no, it's because this history is so sensitive. And I don't think they issue a form for local officials to fill because it's just so sensitive. So that we have no way of knowing. Yeah.
Okay, but there's a category, I assume, of,
But because they would not sort of advertise this as government achievement.
sure, sure. But we know we have committees in all the corporations from, you know,
Oh, the party
Communist
committees,
Party
yeah. That's
committee, and I just
separate
wonder
from this.
whether.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Somewhat separate. Maybe
Yeah,
not.
well,
I
of
mean,
course,
they-
you know, there's a limit to what they can disclose.
Right.
And but by the way, it's really hard to study this subject. Eastern Europe, you think communist regimes fell and they will open up? No, only one country, East Germany. Not Russia, not even Poland, not Hungary, because it's so sensitive. It's just, it could implicate a lot of people.
Well, Bulgaria, Martin, they got this.
But not the sort of as granular
They're great.
as
GDR.
as GDR is a gold mine.
It's very similar.
Yeah, very.
Back then, yeah.
Thank you. So you talked a lot about the surveillance state in China. To what extent is this surveillance state developed in Hong Kong and Macau?
No, I think first we don't have any evidence, so you can only. But I can guess is that right now they're sort of building, especially Hong Kong, Macau. No.
There's a
yeah.
lot. Well, there's a lot.
Well, yeah, I think Macau probably are much more worried about money laundering. So Hong Kong is political subversion. So we don't know, but they're going to do this in Hong Kong. There's absolutely no question about this.
Well, this is a story I would share. I think it's okay. It's been a few years, like in 2017 during the umbrella movement, a friend of mine who's close to, let's say, a big Chinese company.
Yeah.
And he said that the company had to rent out, 50 hotel rooms
Yeah.
so that mainland agents can stay there.
Oh. I'm not surprised.
While they're monitoring
Yeah,
the protests
yeah.
in Hong Kong.
That's,
But that's only one Chinese company.
One
So
Chinese
like
company.
every
Oh.
Chinese company had to do this. So then you can like 50 times.
Yeah,
like
this is
50
like,
basically.
the unsurpassable advantage of a Leninist system because it's
Yeah, they
mobilized
coordinate.
for big crises.
Last question, yeah, Mike.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could talk about coordination, right? So obviously
Yeah.
the strength of the Leninist system,
Yeah.
and especially how it works with or against technology, right? Because one of the things that's a problem with like e-government, for example,
Yes.
is that everybody's using different platforms, none of them talk to another very well, using different software and different like file outputs. They can't get the computers to talk to one another. Have they solved this to your
No, but
perception?
I don't know about sort of the effectiveness, but I know how it is done. For example, Sharp Eyes. This is the sort of the visual surveillance program. It is run by, coordinated by political legal committee. So what they do is this committee is explicitly empowered to oversee the project. So the committee would get everybody in the same room, vendors, police, local bureaucracies, and they will work out a solution. And then the committee would now, at regular intervals, would check on the progress. So this is why this committee is so important.
Okay, one last question. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. What is your thoughts on TikTok, the possibility of co-opting technology companies, even game companies, in having commercial entities create games that self-monitor algorithms, all that?
Yeah, the TikTok does not, they do not mention, so the technology actually, first, there's not much about technology in these official sources. Another thing about technology is that it is surprisingly hard to find documentary evidence about the use of technology. When you look at quite serious work on technology. You get two kinds. One is survey, what people think of the use of technology, which doesn't tell you much. The second is government procurement records, because these things are online. Then you only know what the government has been buying. You really don't know how the technology has been actually used, how they interface, I hate the word, interface with the labor intensive part. That's why I think a book on the techno surveillance needs to be written, but it will be a huge challenge. So in terms of TikTok and these, I'm sure creative people inside the Chinese Communist Party are thinking about how to use TikTok. But within China, they don't need TikTok because the party controls all the propaganda, right? Outside, that's a very different story.
Well, so let's say that the known cases of China using social media to recruit spies happen on LinkedIn. It's on Facebook and LinkedIn. So I mean, even American apps, American platforms are very vulnerable to this kind of stuff. Anyway, time has come to an end, unfortunately, although we could easily go on for another hour. Remember, next week we have another excellent talk by another McFarquhar person. So Ya Feng is coming to talk about his new book, The Rise and Fall of the East. So hope all of you can join us. In the meantime, please join me in thanking Professor.